You're listening to Romancing in Paris on Paris Underground Radio.
Hello, and welcome to the Romancing in Paris podcast. I'm your host, Lily Heise. In this podcast, we'll be traveling around the city as I pick out my top romantic spots per arrondissement. You don't have to visit these places only as a couple. Exploring them can be the expression of your own love of Paris. Are you ready to get romancing in Paris? Hello, and welcome back to Romancing in Paris. In the last episode of the podcast, we returned to the left bank. We ventured to the 5th district to learn more about one of Paris's oldest sites, and one which is terribly romantic. As we shimmy over to the 6th district in today's episode, we'll be visiting something that is a little similar, but also a little different. Similar in that it's one of the oldest places in its category, that is, a restaurant, which makes it different from the type of places we often cover, this being the first restaurant we visit on the podcast. Now, for us to dedicate a whole episode to just one restaurant, it must be pretty special. And oh, so very romantic. Grab your chérie. We're going to Lapérouse. Although Lapérouse isn't the absolute oldest restaurant in all of Paris, and if you're curious to find out more about those, see my website Je t'aime neither for an article I wrote on the subject. Lapérouse is among the oldest in the city, and in addition to its storied history, Lapérouse ranks very high on the list of the most seductive restaurants in the city, which we'll learn more about in due course. Located at 51 Quai des Grands Augustins, right on the Seine River a few blocks west of Place Saint-Michel, the restaurant is found within a historic private mansion, a national classified monument at that. The home was previously owned by François Forget, Louis XIV's superintendent of waters and forests, which, if you've been to Versailles and seen its spectacular fountains and the surrounding forests, you'll know was an important position, so much so to have such an elaborate and elegant Parisian dwelling. In 1766, the mansion was bought by Monsieur Lefebvre, the beverage maker of Louis XV and a wine merchant, who transformed his newly acquired property into a shop to sell his wares. Since there was a market nearby, Lefebvre also began selling some food, which quickly proved popular. In addition, though due to the building's convenient location near the market, he started renting out the mansion's former maids' quarters to out-of-towners doing business at the market. These rooms will come up again later on in the podcast. Around 1850, the establishment was purchased by a certain Jules Lapérouse. Lapérouse spelt all in one word. Now, his name happened to be similar to another figure of French history, Jean-François de Lapérouse, who was a famed 17th century navigator, and who is occasionally mistakenly linked to the restaurant. The building's new proprietor decided to shift its focus mainly over to food, as restaurants were becoming increasingly trendy over the course of the 19th century. He had the interiors redecorated in a chic Second Empire style, and soon the restaurant became a meeting point for the who's who of mid-19th century Paris, especially those in literary and political circles, like our friend Victor Hugo, who made a guest appearance in the last episode, but also writers Georges Sand, Gustave Flaubert, Émile Zola, as well as other important figures of the times, like actress Sarah Bernhardt, composer Hector Berlioz, and artist Auguste Rodin, and Eugene Delacroix, who regular listeners of the podcast might recall had a studio home situated just a short walk away from the restaurant, which was the subject of the first podcast on the 6th District, number 6 of the podcast, on the Rue Furstenberg. The restaurant made such an impression that it inspired some of its customers' writing. For example, Marcel Proust courted a young lover, Laure Heyman, here. Both Laure, renamed Odette, and the restaurant appear in his opus In Search of Lost Time. Legendary French chef Auguste Escoffier took over the kitchens, and under his helm the establishment was propelled to new culinary heights. It kept rising on the gastronomic ladder and was among one of the first restaurants to be awarded 3 Michelin stars in 1933, although these were later lost in 1969. During the 20th century, the stylish restaurant continued to draw in illustrious clients. On a given night, one could find the likes of Jean Cocteau, Albert Einstein, or Orson Welles at its tables. Among these customers were also a number of famous couples: the Duke of Windsor and Wallis Simpson, Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir, or more recently, George and Amal Clooney. It was apparently here where rebellious rocker Serge Gainsbourg met his muse Jane Birkin. Romance is definitely imbued in Lapérouse's walls. In some of the building's walls more than others. Here's where things get extra titillating. The restaurant has its main dining room and salon privé. Those former maids' quarters were converted into 10 private dining rooms, where certain clients would woo their lovers. Oh la la, Lapérouse. These salons were named after ships which had gone missing, such as La Boussole or L'Astrolabe, a nod towards the other Lapérouse, the navigator. They were decorated in a sensual and seductive boudoir style, with candlelit tables, cozy love seats, and large mirrors covered in scratches made by these mistresses and other ladies of pleasure, as they tested the authenticity of the diamond gifts they'd just been given by their benefactors. Of all gems, only diamonds can scratch glass. Behind closed doors and extremely private, staff only come into these private dining rooms when guests ring a bell. These private salons were particularly coveted by politicians to grant them utmost discretion. Legend has it that there's a back stairwell that goes down to a secret underground tunnel which leads to the French Senate, found a few blocks to the south. No matter if this is true or not, all of this adds to the venue's romantic allure. If you're enjoying this episode of Romancing in Paris, you may also like to listen in to our sister podcast, The Heart of You, an engaging show about spirituality and divination. Romancing in Paris will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
And now back to Romancing in Paris.
A few years ago, hospitality businessman Benjamin Patou bought up the restaurant. Fortunately, he's retained its historic essence while giving it some light modern freshness. This has attracted a whole new fashionable clientele, like Nicole Kidman and Kate Moss. He's also brought on an award-winning chef. Perhaps those Michelin stars will also one day return. In addition to the original location, he opened a posh outpost of Lapérouse at the newly opened Hôtel de la Marine, an opulent historic palace overlooking Place de la Concorde, which was restored and opened to the public. This also makes for a different and wonderful romantic outing. The original Lapérouse is a little bit pricey without completely breaking the bank. Those private salons do come at an additional fee, but they are the perfect spot for a special occasion dinner or for some extra seductive wooing. Diamond bearers can still leave their mark on the mirrors. Hint, hint. Without dining at the restaurant, you can enjoy a drink in the swank bar located on the ground floor. Enveloped in red velour and featuring intimate seating, this is a unique and chic place to get a date night started off. Or, why not, impress a first date. Even here, you're bound to woo and wow your chérie and have a perfectly romantic outing in the 6th District. If you come for lunch, why not carry on your date by taking an amble over to the Rue Fustembourg to pay homage to Delacroix? Or, after dinner, take a hand-in-hand moonlight stroll through the fabulously atmospheric back streets of the 6th arrondissement. Thank you for listening to this latest episode of Romancing in Paris. If you have a minute, please rate or review it. It's extremely helpful for attracting potential new listeners. If you're looking for more romantic ideas, see my website, jetammeneither.com, which has a wonderful collection of original date ideas in Paris and beyond. And if you would like to support the network, please see our Patreon page, which includes fantastic extras for its members. Until next time, happy romancing in Paris.
This episode of Romancing in Paris was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com.